On the 31st of August, 1986, the passenger liner Admiral Nakhimov slipped away from its berth in Novorossiysk, Russia, on the Black Sea, her destination being Sochi, Russia. But she would never make it there, colliding with a tanker not long after departing and sinking. But oddly enough for this ill-fated ship, this wouldn't have been the first time she sank, but it would be the last time, and the worst maritime disaster in Russian history. The SS Admiral Nakhimov actually began her life in 1925 in the Weimar Republic as the SS Berlin. Built by the Bremer Vulcan Company in Vigasek, Germany, she was launched 24 March 1925 and commissioned 17 September 1925. The large passenger liner was 572 feet or 174 meters long and 69 feet or 21.02 meters at the beam. The vessel was 15,286 gross registered tons and could carry 1,101 passengers and 313 crew. Powered by two powerful four-cylinder triple expansion steam engines, she generated an impressive 12,000 horsepower under her twin screws, pushing her along at a healthy 16 knots. The vessel would operate the Bremen to New York Atlantic crossing, ferrying passengers from the Weimar Republic to New York and back, having a prosperous and uneventful service life. She even assisted in rescuing passengers from the ill-fated SS Vestris when she sank near Hampton Roads, Virginia in November of 1928. But that's a story for another video. The ship ran this route even after Adolf Hitler took power and the Weimar Republic became Nazi Germany. But a few years later, the Nazi Party would have a different plan for the passenger liner. In 1933, the Deutsches Arbeitsfront, or German Labor Front, started a state-run socialist program called Kraft durch Freude, or Strength Through Joy. This program was meant to bolster the morale of the working class by making often unaffordable luxuries more cheaply available to the workers. Things like trips on passenger liners. For this purpose, the SS Berlin would be acquisitioned by the government for the program in 1938. She would be used for this purpose only 2 times before the winds of war would see her repurposed once again by the German Kriegsmarine in July 16th of 1939. The Berlin would be outfitted as a hospital ship, receiving the designation Lazarettschiffs A. She finished her retrofit on 23 August, just in time for the German invasion of Poland in September and the outbreak of World War II. The vessel would spend the majority of the war in the relative safety of Norwegian waters, which is lucky. The conflict was extremely costly for the Kriegsmarine, losing many vessels over the lengthy conflict. But by January of 1945, she had come through mostly unscathed. By this time, the Wehrmacht was on the back foot, as the Soviet army was pushing them back day by day on their march to Berlin. In desperation, the Germans initiated Operation Hannibal, a coordinated retreat by sea of troops and civilians from East Prussia and Poland. Lazarettschiff A, or the SS Berlin, was slated to assist in the evacuation. The entire operation would end up being extremely costly in German lives. But the Berlin would actually never be able to be a part of it, striking a naval mine in the early part of the operation just off of Swinemünde. Realizing the vessel wouldn't be able to assist and needed immediate repairs, the hospital ship was taken into tow to be pulled into Kiel for repairs. But whilst in tow, her misfortunes wouldn't end. She struck another mine, this one fatally wounding the already damaged ship and killed 1 crewman. Seeing no way of saving the foundering ship, the crew made a last desperate choice, pulling her into shallow water to beach her. The ship touched bottom and remained there. All her useful equipment was stripped off her by the 5th of February, and she was abandoned by the Kriegsmarine as they fled in terror from the impending Soviet tide. It's interesting to note that the German word for hospital is Lazarett, which is derived from the name Lazarus. Saint Lazarus being a man whom Jesus Christ resurrected from death 4 days after his passing, according to the Book of John. Like Lazarus of Bethany, the SS Berlin too would be brought back from death, though not in 4 days, but in 4 years. In 1949, the Soviets would lay claim to the sunken passenger liner, patching her up and rising her from her shallow, watery grave. The vessel would be refitted and repaired, the refit increasing her weight to 17,053 gross registered tons. She would be renamed the SS Admiral Nakhimov, after the Russian admiral of the mid-19th century who led Russian naval and ground forces during the siege of Sevastopol during the Crimean War. The Admiral Nakhimov would enter service with the Black Sea Steamship Company in 1957, her route being the regular Black Sea coastal service between Odessa and Batum, with stops in Yalta, Novorossiysk, Sevastopol, Batum, and Sochi. She served this route fairly faithfully, doing so for decades. At one point, however, she was requisitioned to transport troops to Cuba in 1962 for the Cuban Missile Crisis. But by 1986, the aged passenger liner was over 6 decades old, and passengers often commented on such things. Many claim that despite her lavish and well-maintained exterior, her interior was showing its age. The ship boasted a cinema, bars, a pool, and a restaurant. But rumors were spreading that this would be her final season in operation. Her age was catching up to her, though whether that was true or not would never be confirmed. On the 31st of August 1986, the SS Admiral Nakhimov would leave its moorings in Novorossiysk, Russia at 2200, outbound for its next stop of Sochi, Russia. Aboard were 346 crew and 888 passengers, people from all over Eastern Europe and Asia, Ukraine, Russia, Moldova, the Baltics, and Central Asia. The captain aboard was Vadim Markov, 56, a veteran captain of the Black Sea Fleet. Also on the bridge as well was his second-in-command, Alexander Chodnovsky. Upon leaving the pier, outbound Seamus Bay, the bridge team aboard the Admiral Nakhimov consulted with the local vessel traffic service to see if they would encounter any vessels on their outbound trip. They would encounter only one, a bulk freighter called the Pyotr Vasev. The 602-foot-long, 18,000-ton bulk carrier was transporting Canadian oats and barley. She was being captained by a Viktor Tkachenko, age 44. As per the rules of the road, the Admiral Nakhimov would have been the giveaway vessel, as the freighter was inbound, approaching from the starboard side of the Nakhimov. Captain Markov contacted the Pyotr Vasev to facilitate passing arrangements, to which Captain Tkachenko responded with, "Don't worry, we'll pass clear of each other. We will take care of everything," seemingly taking on the responsibility of the giveaway vessel. Satisfied with the response, Captain Markov retired to his cabin, leaving Mr. Chodnovsky on the bridge. Aboard the ship, the passengers and remainder of the crew were completely unaware of the rest of the sea around them. Guests watched a movie in the cinema, a 1985 war movie called I Loved You More Than Life. A band was playing and passengers enjoyed drinks at the bar, or dined at the restaurant. Throughout the ship, most of the portholes had been opened to let air circulate through the stuffy old ship, which didn't have any sort of cooling to combat the late August heat. But back on the bridge, Alexander Chodnovsky was becoming increasingly nervous. Despite his reassurance, Captain Viktor Tkachenko hadn't altered the Pyotr's course or speed at all. According to the radar, the ships were on a rapid collision course, something called CBDR, or Constant Bearing Decreasing Range. But despite this being noticed aboard Nakhimov, Captain Tkachenko didn't come to the same conclusion, believing the ships would pass each other well enough apart. Still nervous, Chodnovsky altered the passenger liner's course to port, away from the encroaching freighter, but by very small increments, first 5 degrees, then 10 degrees. But that wouldn't be enough. Despite a few nervous radio calls from the Nakhimov, the Pyotr still bore down on her, until finally, a lookout on the Pyotr Vasev called out, saying he spotted the Admiral Nakhimov right off the bow, and they would surely hit. At 23:10, Tkachenko ordered full astern propulsion, but it was too little too late. At 23:12, the Pyotr Vasev slammed into the starboard side of the SS Admiral Nakhimov, going just around 5 knots. The collision, despite being at relatively low speed, was devastating. The bow of the 18,000-ton freighter gouged a massive 900-square-foot hole in the side of the passenger liner, much of it below the waterline. The entire ship shuddered, shocking passengers and crew alike. Water rushed into the engineering spaces of the Nakhimov, snuffing out her fires, killing the ship's engines and tripping off her generators. The ship was plunged into darkness. Hundreds attending the cinema panicked, scrambling over each other to escape the darkened theater. Others throughout the ship were plunged into darkness, only to feel the ship begin to list to starboard. A brave engineer rushed into the emergency generator to try and restore power. The lights flipped back on for all of 2 minutes, before water reached the generator, drowning it and the engineer. The ship was dark once more. Panicked passengers fled the ship, leaping into the sea as the crew did what little they could to launch lifeboats. scant few being able to be launched before the list became too great. Passengers leapt from open windows into the sea until the ship was nearly on her side. A bartender who survived later remembers sliding down the starboard side of the ship into the Black Sea. She recalls watching passengers getting sucked into open portholes in the side of the ship as they filled with water, not seeing them come back out. The ship sank with terrifying rapidity. It took only 7 minutes for the SS Admiral Nakhimov to slip beneath the waves. Few had any time at all to don life jackets, many clinging to flotsam from the ship. Others scrambled to swim for the few overladen life rafts. Those inside recall having to push and kick away survivors for fear of the boats being swamped by the hundreds of people in the water. By now, the Pyotr Vasev had backed away, her bow heavily damaged, but the ship was intact. To his credit, Captain Vadim Markov of the Admiral Nakhimov had done his best assisting with the evacuation of his quickly foundering ship. It's unknown what the helmsman Alexander Chodnovsky had done in the final moments of the ship. He was amongst the many that went down with the passenger liner. Within 10 minutes, rescue vessels had arrived from the nearby port. The ship had sank only 8 miles from port. Crew scrambled to pull the hundreds of passengers and crew from the Black Sea. Helicopters were soon overhead to assist in the search and rescue. But sadly, despite their quick response and Herculean effort, 64 crew and 359 passengers would perish. 423 of the 1,234 on board. Many simply couldn't make it out of the quickly sinking ship in time. For the next few days, divers would dive 150 feet down to the mangled wreck. The news media reported that some may very well still be alive in air pockets in the sunken ship. But divers found no air pockets, only death. They would dive around the clock in teams of 2, bringing up scores of bodies. They did this for days straight, but decided to call off the work after 2 divers perished. One losing track of his oxygen supply, and the other becoming trapped in the wreckage and running low on air. His assistant diver located his unconscious body, but he was dead by the time he was pulled to the surface. In total, it was believed there were still as many as 60 individuals still within the hull of the SS Admiral Nakhimov. There, they would stay. An investigation was launched and commenced in 1987, and quickly found both captains responsible for gross, negligent disregard for the navigational rules of the road. Both captains were charged to 15 years in prison for their responsibility in the worst maritime disaster in Russian history. But for many of the families, this wouldn't seem like enough. 15 years in exchange for hundreds of lives, drowned by the dark waters of the Black Sea. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you found it informative. If you did, please support the channel by liking, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing. I've been growing by leaps and bounds, and it's all thanks to a few just wonderful fans that I've been growing, and it's really great to see so many people so supportive of the channel. So once again, thank you very much, and fair winds and following seas to you, shipmates.